The cameras were rolling, the audience expectant, but nobody anticipated the raw confrontation that would unfold when Hollywood's loudest star tried to expose its quietest soul. What began as another promotional appearance quickly transformed into something far more dangerous, a battle between two philosophies of fame, with only one man prepared for the truth that would emerge. This was meant to be just another evening interview, studio lights blazing, cameras capturing every angle, rehearsed chuckles filling the air. Yet underneath Will Smith's practiced smile, something deeper was stirring, an urge to shatter the quiet, to reveal what he perceived as pretense. Keanu Reeves entered that stage with his characteristic understated presence, radiating a tranquility that seemed to disturb more than any crowd's cheers could soothe. Nobody anticipated the challenge Will would present, and even fewer were ready for how Keanu would respond. And before we dive deeper, share with us your all-time favorite Keanu Reeves film in the comments below. The face-to-face studio stood as a testament to contemporary broadcast design. Translucent panels, bathed in shifting purples and blues, created an almost sacred atmosphere. Every detail, from the ivory leather seats positioned for intimate dialogue to the subtle ceiling lights twinkling like distant stars, had been precisely arranged for this moment. A special broadcast featuring two Hollywood titans in unprecedented conversation. Yet beneath the glamour, beyond the practiced applause and studio countdowns, tension crackled in the atmosphere, something unspoken, something dangerous. Helena Cortez, the program's anchor and among America's most distinguished media personalities, adjusted her communication device while waiting in the wings. Her interview resume included world leaders, Nobel laureates, creative visionaries, and political dissidents, yet tonight her heartbeat quickened unusually. This combination of Will Smith and Keanu Reeves carried an unpredictable energy that even her seasoned instincts couldn't fully anticipate. She stepped into the spotlight as the production manager signaled readiness. 30 seconds, Helena, we're broadcasting coast to coast. She acknowledged with a nod, straightened her blazer, and positioned herself beneath the stage lights as the opening theme began. The countdown resonated throughout the facility in 5, 4, 3, 2. Cue illumination, cue audience, cue destiny. Good evening, distinguished viewers, Helena addressed the crowd, her voice measured yet electric. Tonight's face-to-face presents something extraordinary. We're hosting not merely two of cinema's most recognizable figures, but two individuals who've influenced entire generations through their craft, their decisions, their quietude, and their declarations. The audience responded with eager applause. First, a performer whose identity embodies magnetism, determination, and commercial triumph. He's confronted celebrity directly, with bravery, with humor, and occasionally with conflict. Please give your warmest welcome to Will Smith. The crowd exploded as "Getting Jiggy With It" pulsed through the sound system. Will Smith bounded onto the stage with his trademark vitality, executing a few dance moves, greeting front-row spectators with high fives, embracing Helena briefly, then settling into his chair with the assurance of someone who'd commanded stages for 30 years. Helena allowed the enthusiasm to subside before proceeding. And now, a figure who's evolved into an enigma, a legend, a silent revolution within Hollywood. He doesn't pursue the limelight, yet it invariably discovers him an embodiment of understated power and creative authenticity. Please welcome Keanu Reeves. The musical backdrop shifted, more contemplative, more reflective. Keanu approached deliberately, clothed entirely in black, a plain shirt, weather jacket, denim. A silver cross pendant rested against his chest. He acknowledged Helena respectfully, then extended Will a firm, wordless handshake. Will responded with a companionable shoulder tap, though his gaze held something beyond casual banter, a hint of confrontation, of deeper intention. Keanu observed this but remained silent. Helena directed them to their opposing seats, matching armchairs with a modest table between them. Will, Keanu, welcome, she said, her manner cordial yet authoritative. Tonight belongs to you both. No editing, no predetermined responses, simply authentic dialogue. The world is paying attention. The lighting softened slightly, cameras moved closer. and anticipation thickened the air. Will reclined, maintaining his smile. Man, I've always wanted to share a platform with you, he told Keanu. You've got this whole Hollywood philosopher with firepower vibe going like nobody can predict whether you'll recite philosophy or launch into an action sequence. The audience responded with laughter. Keanu offered a subtle smile. We all shatter something, he replied quietly, even when our only intention is to observe. Will's eyebrows lifted. This wasn't the typical late-night soundbite, but he adapted. Smoothly, can I speak honestly? He asked, leaning forward. Keanu nodded once. Will paused dramatically, then delivered. Don't you think your career could have reached greater heights if you weren't so damn deliberate? Gasps rippled through the audience, followed by silence. Even Helena's expression registered surprise. Keanu remained unmoved, not even a blink. He simply angled his head slightly, as though this question had been suspended between them all. Evening, finally finding its moment to land, the audience shifted restlessly. A few nervous chuckles attempted to dissolve the tension, but failed. Keanu drew a breath. When his voice emerged, it was low, controlled, neither angry nor defensive, simply centered. What you interpret as deliberate, I understand as present? The words struck like whispered thunder. Will blinked. Present? Indeed, Keanu continued. Existing fully in this moment, not pursuing the next agreement or tomorrow's headlines. Simply being alive, the crowd murmured. Someone began applauding, then stopped mid-clap. Even the cameras seemed to pause their breathing. Will adjusted his position, crossing one leg over the other. That's profound, brother, but Hollywood doesn't compensate presence, it rewards performance. If I cease movement, I vanish. Keanu nodded slowly. What occurs when you vanish from yourself? The question halted Will mid-thought. Helena glanced at her notes. This hadn't been scripted. Will laughed, but the sound felt forced. Listen, I don't retreat. I appear. I confront situations. I don't hide behind symbolism and brooding quietude. Sometimes, Keanu said, silence represents the most challenging confrontation of all. Will opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time, his smile wavered. The audience had stopped laughing. They were listening. Helena leaned in gently. Keanu, you appear comfortable with uncertainty? Has this always been your nature? No, he answered. I acquired it. I lost much my sister River, time, happiness. I withdrew from everything before learning how to remain present. Will frowned. Slightly. You withdrew? Keanu nodded. Not because I couldn't confront the world, but because I needed to hear something quieter than applause. The studio held its breath. Keanu Reeves leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but weighted with purpose. There's something I must ask you, Will. Will blinked, his confident grin diminishing just enough to reveal a flicker of unease. All right, he said carefully. Proceed. Keanu didn't rush the question. He studied Will not as an adversary, but as a reflection. The silence extended, not awkwardly but purposefully. Then he spoke. Why did you genuinely want this interview? Will exhaled sharply, almost chuckling. Man, come on, it's television. It's strong ratings. You and me in conversation, that's entertainment gold. Keanu simply maintained his steady, patient gaze. Will briefly searched the audience for support. In the familiar rhythm of performance, but the laughter had ceased. The energy had transformed. Fine, Will added, shifting uncomfortably. If you're seeking something deeper, perhaps I thought it would be compelling two icons, contrasting philosophies, a comparison. Keanu tilted his head. Or perhaps you needed something. Will paused. Something in his expression tightened. Helena observed silently, her eyes moving between them, her notes forgotten. She understood this was no longer her program. Okay, Sage, Will said with a chuckle that didn't reach. His eyes. What do you believe I needed? Keanu didn't respond with assumptions. Instead, he reflected the question back gently, but without retreat. That's what I'm curious about, Will. What part of you felt I was the one you had to confront? The audience stirred. Will leaned back, arms crossed a defensive stance. You've cultivated this image, man unreachable, enigmatic. People project all this sanctity onto you. Meanwhile, I've had my struggles broadcast globally. Keanu nodded. Slowly, I understand, and I regret you endured that. Will hadn't expected compassion. It disarmed him more than any comeback could. But Keanu continued. The world doesn't admire me for my silence. They admire me because I ceased performing. Will looked down. Something flickered across his features, something approaching recognition. You think I'm performing now? Keanu didn't answer directly. Instead, he shared a memory. There was an admirer, he said, perhaps a decade ago. He approached me outside a bookshop. He appeared exhausted, hollow. He didn't request a photograph. He simply said, "Your films helped me survive my brother's passing." Then he added, "You taught me I didn't need to destroy myself." The studio atmosphere grew heavy. Will swallowed. Even Helena appeared stunned. I said nothing to him, Keanu continued. I simply embraced him. We stood there perhaps a minute in silence. That moment communicated more than countless interviews. Will reclined, his focus directed. Somewhere beyond the studio walls. That kind of pain, I recognize it, he said quietly. But I had to continue, keep creating sound, keep being Will Smith. Keanu gave him space. Sometimes noise prevents us from hearing what's fracturing. Will looked at him, this time without performance in his gaze. So you simply departed after. Your sister? Keanu nodded. I didn't want to exist in a world that could take her away, but you returned, Will observed. You continued making films portraying heroes. Keanu looked up. Because I realized silence isn't escape, it's preparation. Will frowned. Preparation for what? Keanu answered without hesitation. The truth. A low murmur rolled through the audience. Will allowed the words to settle, then leaned forward. The energy shifted again. Will's voice sharpened, not with aggression, but with a kind of weary defiance. You want truth? Very well. The dynamic changed. Will's voice intensified, not with hostility, but with exhausted resistance. You speak of silence like it's sacred, but I didn't receive that privilege. I didn't vanish when the world attacked me after my errors, my breakdowns. I had to stand there, absorb it, apologize, reconstruct. You disappear, then resurface like a saint with facial hair and melancholy eyes. Keanu didn't flinch. And that enjay you? Will stared at him, then unexpectedly laughed, but this time it was bitter. I suppose it does. Silence followed. Then Keanu spoke again. Perhaps because you believe the only way to earn love is through public suffering. Will's eyes narrowed. He opened his mouth, but no words emerged. You think love originates from applause? Keanu continued. But applause fades, it always fades. Helena finally spoke. But don't we all seek validation in some form? Keanu turned to her gently. Validation is like sugar, it provides a rush, but presence nourishes. The audience was quiet now, not from boredom, but from reverence. Will appeared tired for the first time, not physically, but emotionally. You know what? Man, he said, his voice softer now, sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had remained quiet more. Perhaps people wouldn't despise me so intensely. People don't despise you, Keanu said. They simply don't know how to hold your pain. Will looked at him, then away. And what about you? What do you do with your pain? Keanu sat with the question, his eyes unwavering. I don't battle it. I sit with it, walk with it. Some days it walks me. Will was silent. The audience too. Even the camera operators barely breathed. Then Keanu leaned forward. Can I ask you something else? Will nodded barely. What would happen if you stopped being Will Smith for just one evening? Will didn't answer. His jaw clenched, his eyes glossy. Now, but he fought the tears. Keanu didn't press. He just sat there still, present, and somehow that silence was louder than anything Will had ever heard. Will attempted to speak, but before he could, Keanu raised his hand again, just slightly. There's one more thing I need to know, he said. Will looked up. Bracing himself, Keanu's voice dropped to a whisper, but it echoed like thunder. Who are you when no one's applauding? Keanu Reeves leaned in, eyes serene but unwavering. Why did you genuinely want this interview, Will? Will smirked, attempting to maintain control. Come on, man, it's ratings. 2 legends, 1 couch. It's quality television. Keanu didn't blink. No, there's something more. Will shifted uneasily. The crowd sensed it too. All right, perhaps I wanted contrast, he said loudly. Sound and silence, fire and water. Keanu tilted his head. Or perhaps you needed to confront something in me or in yourself. Will looked away, then back. You know what I resent? That people worship your composure. You barely speak and they treat you like some enlightened teacher. Keanu remained. Still, and that disturbs you? Will snapped back. Hell yes, it does. I've bled for my applause, worked, struggled, suffered publicly. You just exist, and somehow they love you more for it. Keanu responded gently. Perhaps they're not loving me. Perhaps they're loving the space I leave for them to see themselves. Will paused. Something cracked in his expression. You ever feel like you're running just to stay visible? All the time, Keanu said, until I stopped. Will scoffed. Easy for you to say you disappeared? You had the luxury of silence? I stayed, took the hits, owned my scandals. And did that bring peace? Will didn't answer. Keanu's voice softened. I've lost people too, River, my sister. I didn't vanish because I was enlightened. I vanished because I was grieving. Will looked at him, truly looked, and the silence helped. No, at first it consumed me. But eventually it became a place I could hear my own voice again. Will sat back, almost whispering, I don't know what mine sounds like anymore. Keanu leaned in. That's why we're here. Will blinked, emotions rising. I came to expose you, make you crack. But all I've done is crack open. Maybe that's the point. Keanu said. Will's voice cracked. You don't understand. I need the noise, the laugh track, the love. Keanu nodded. We all need love. But if it only exists when you're performing, is it love or applause? That question landed hard. Will looked down. You think I'm still acting? I think you're tired. The silence stretched again, not as tension, but recognition. Will looked up. You know the scariest thing? I don't know who I am when the cameras turn off. Keanu's reply was soft, steady. Then it's time to find out. Will didn't respond, but something in him collapsed quietly. He wasn't performing anymore. He was finally listening. The silence in the studio was no longer awkward. It was transformative. Will Smith looked up at Keanu Reeves, still processing everything that had been said. You know what? Will said, his voice lower now. People only love you because you don't talk. Keanu didn't blink. And what if that's true? Then maybe if you spoke more, they'd see who you really are, and maybe they wouldn't like it. Keanu's reply was soft. You think love has to be loud to be real? Will stood halfway, then sat back down, frustrated. I earned every bit of love I got, every cheer, every laugh. I fought for it. And what if I earned mine by stopping the fight? Keanu asked gently. The audience leaned in. Will's jaw clenched. You hide behind metaphors. You speak in riddles. Keanu nodded. Or maybe I just got tired of performing pain for people who don't know what to do with silence. Will exhaled sharply. You think I like performing? I think you forgot who you are underneath it. Will paused, his eyes flicking between Keanu and the crowd. I don't even know anymore. Keanu leaned forward. Then maybe that's the question you've been avoiding. Will swallowed hard. You don't get it. If I stop performing, I disappear? Or maybe, Keanu said, you return. Will looked up sharply. You ever feel like you're a character in someone else's movie? Keanu's gaze didn't waver. Every day until I decided to walk off set. Helena remained silent, barely breathing. Will's voice cracked. You know what scares me? The idea that no one would care if I was just me. Keanu tilted his head. Then let's test it. Take the mask off right here, right now. Will laughed bitterly. You say that like it's easy. It's not. It's honest. Will stood. He turned to face the audience, then back to Keanu. I built a version of myself people admire, but I don't know if I admire him. Keanu stepped closer. Then maybe it's time to meet the version who doesn't need applause. Will looked at him, eyes glassy. Do you think he's worth meeting? I think he's waiting. Will sat again, trembling slightly. I wanted to break you tonight. Wanted to prove you weren't this untouchable mystery. And? Keanu asked calmly. Will sighed. I think I'm the one breaking. Keanu didn't move, didn't smile. Then you're finally getting honest. Will looked up. whispering, "I forgot who I was before the fame." Keanu leaned forward, his voice like a warm echo. "Then let's remember together." Music. Will Smith sat in silence, jaw tight, breathing uneven. Then he spoke. "You want the truth? I didn't invite you here because I admire you." Keanu stayed quiet. Will look down. "I invited you because I wanted to beat you." The audience froze. "I've spent years watching people love you for being quiet. I scream, bleed, sweat for the crowd. And you," he pointed, "you just exist, and they love it." Keanu didn't react. "I hated that," Will continued, "because I felt like if I stopped trying, I'd vanish." Keanu nodded softly. "Trying what?" Will's voice cracked. "Trying to be enough." The words hung in the air like a confession. No one dared interrupt. "I perform because I don't trust silence," Will said. "In silence, I hear the fear, the doubt, the stuff I've been running from since I was a kid." Keanu leaned forward slightly. "And what happens if you stop running?" Will laughed bitterly. "I don't know. Maybe I collapse." Keanu's reply was gentle. "Then maybe it's time to collapse." Will stared at him, stunned. "You're saying fall apart?" "I'm saying fall apart and stop pretending you're not already breaking." Will's hand covered his mouth. His shoulders trembled slightly. Then he spoke again. "I missed recitals, birthdays. I told myself I was building a future for them, but really, I was hiding in the work." Keanu nodded. "You weren't building a life, you were building a disguise." Will's voice turned to a whisper. "You ever wonder what you pass down to your kids besides the money?" Keanu answered, "We pass on what we don't heal." Will closed his eyes. "I don't know how to forgive myself." "It starts with honesty," Keanu said. "And you're already doing that." Will opened his eyes red but clear. "You really think I can come back from all this?" Keanu didn't hesitate. "You don't need to come back. You just need to show up." A silence followed, but this time it felt different, peaceful. Still. Will smiled through the tears. "You talk like someone who's already buried the worst of himself." Keanu looked at him. "I have, and I visit the grave often." Will exhaled. "You said earlier the world doesn't need versions of me, just me." Keanu nodded. "The world needs the man, not the act." Will shook his head slowly. "I wish someone had told me that before." "Maybe," Keanu said. "You weren't ready to hear it until now." They sat in the quiet, two men, no roles, no masks. Just truth. Keanu Reeves sat still, but his eyes carried the weight of years. Will Smith looked at him, quieter now. "Why are you always so calm?" he asked. Keanu exhaled slowly. "Because I lost everything and didn't know how to keep breathing." Will sat up straighter. Keanu continued. "When my sister died, the world went silent. But it wasn't peace, it was emptiness. I stopped smiling, stopped feeling. People called it mystery, but really I was just broken." Will nodded slowly. "And no one saw that?" "They saw what they wanted," Keanu said. "But kindness was all I had left that didn't hurt." Will's eyes welled up. "That's why people trust you. You don't fake your pain." Keanu looked at him gently. "And you do." Will didn't answer right away. "I faked everything: strength, coolness, forgiveness, even joy. I gave people what they needed so I didn't have to show them what I didn't have." "The air thickened." "I cheated," Will said. "I lied." "I disappeared emotionally, all while smiling, apologizing with style." Keanu listened without judgment. "You were trying to fix the image," he said, "not the wound." Will nodded slowly. "I kept thinking if I worked hard enough, gave enough, they'd love me without the act. But they never saw me because I never showed me." Keanu leaned in. "Maybe now you are?" Will's voice dropped. "Sometimes I look at my kids and wonder what I passed down: my fear, my need to be perfect." "We pass on what we don't heal," Keanu replied softly. Will wiped his eyes. "I built a life people admire, but I don't admire the man who lives in it." Keanu looked at him. "Then maybe it's time to meet the man who doesn't need applause." "I don't know who that is. He's still here, just quiet." Helena, nearly in tears, finally spoke. "Will, what would you say to him, the man behind the image?" Will hesitated then. "I'm sorry I left you behind." Keanu smiled soft, knowing. "That's a start." Another long silence passed, but this one felt healing. Will looked up again. How do you forgive yourself? Keanu answered, by staying, by not abandoning the parts of you that hurt. Forgiveness isn't a moment, it's presence, Will nodded. I think I've spent my whole life running from stillness. Keanu reached out, placing a hand on Will's shoulder. Then stop running, Will's eyes watered again. I think I just met myself, Keanu smiled gently. And you're still here. The studio was silent, not the silence of awkwardness, but the silence of something sacred just having unfolded. Will Smith sat still, eyes red but steady. Keanu Reeves was beside him, grounded, open, calm. Helena finally broke the quiet. Will, would you like to say something? Will stood up slowly, no bravado, no act, just breath. I brought Keanu here to prove something, to show the world that he's just a man. He looked at Keanu. But tonight he showed me that I'm just a man, and that's enough. He turned to the audience. I've lived my whole life chasing applause, thinking that's where love came from.